Thank you all for joining us on Wednesday, May 19th, 2021. So excited to talk about voting reflections with you today. As you all may know, we just wrapped up voting on our citywide investment plan vote after a 10-week voting period. We launched on Thursday, February 18th at our 2021 assembly, We Be Known. And we just wrapped up on May 7th. So this is going to be pretty exciting conversation. I'm just going to read through some stats about the vote real quick. So if y'all know we communicate a lot, so you should have at this point, if you voted, you should have gotten a thank you note, and you should have received the results in your email. But if you didn't receive the results, you should know a little bit of information. So at Ujima, we do work with a quorum. Our quorum is 50% plus one of all voting members. During this voting period, we had 352 eligible voters, meaning voting members, making our quorum 177. About 73 voting members cast their ballot, which was around 20% of our total eligible voters. So this means that we did not reach quorum. You know, we have been talking about a little bit of an interesting philosophical tidbit, you know, that amongst ourselves, just in, you know, regards to reflection, as we were doing a little bit earlier. You know, we do this with all our votes, you know, learning or thinking about, you know, what success, failure means, you know, defining success differently. And we will be doing a For Ujima by Ujima, aka FUBU, reflection video a little later in the month, which we will, you know, expound on these things a little bit more. Sorry, I'm just checking the chat. Thank you, Nia. So tonight, we're going to be going over ballot feedback, showcasing the debrief form, which we will invite you to fill out at the end, and as well as answer any questions and leave any room for response. Next week, we will also talk about what happens to the citywide investment plan list now, and look forward to our next assemblies, which will happen a little later in the year. By way of background, we've had 3 previous votes to date. This is per Nia Evans. Thank you, Nia. So we had the Community Standards Committee vote, the EPIC Spring 2019 ballot, and the Winter 2019 ballot. So this is our 4th vote. Oh, I'm sorry, 2018. Thank you, Nia. So the Community Standards Committee vote was actually in 2018. So this is super exciting stuff. And we're just going to jump right in. So today we're going to be starting with a little bit of ballot feedback. We got a bunch of thank yous. So thank you back for voting. You know, super exciting about that. We also got a little bit of positive feedback. So I'm just going to go through that really quick. I really enjoyed learning about all the businesses that were new to me. Thank you for the list of websites. I feel that I preferred to give green checks to those I personally knew, which tended to be closer to me because they were in Hyde Park. This list does incentivize me to visit the businesses when I travel to other neighborhoods or I'm looking for those kinds of services. This voting process is also pushing me in a good way to pay more attention to Boston Ujima Project's ongoing work with a little smiley face. So thank you to that person. The second one here, I am happy to vote, but I honestly haven't been following / plugged into Ujima to have the foundational knowledge of most of these businesses. I'm going to recommit myself to engaging with the great work Ujima is doing to build a more equitable, inclusive, and community-oriented economy. Boston, this is the third person, Boston Ujima is doing a great job at helping the community. Thank you. Someone said, I think this process was good. I think the 3 options are good, but possibly a tad bit much. I'm sorry, I'm going to read this over. I think this process was good. I think the 3 options are good, but possibly a tad bit much because Nia walked through the longer one. So the longest one that we had was the neighborhood ballot. No, was it sector? I think there was actually sector had the most questions. So this might have been the sector ballot. So they said, but it was still fine. So we're just going to count this as a positive. And, we did have 3 options for our vote. So you could have voted holistically, you could have voted by neighborhood, and you could have voted by sector. Sector meaning by industry that the businesses are in. And we did this very intentionally. We received some feedback in our initial meetings about accessibility. And I think after that, Nia and I had a little bit of a conversation around, how we orient people and what kind of knowledges people, or what kind of ways might be most accessible for people. So some people just want to look at everything all together and just answer 4 questions. And that's fine, and that's great. But it was a lot of businesses. It was 75 businesses plus, and those were the businesses that are still open after the pandemic. We actually had a longer list beforehand. So we chose to, section it off in the ways that made most sense for what we had available. But thank you to that person for that note. Someone said it works well, it just takes time. I think, this is also the same thing. I think that we tried really hard to kind of, have really simple, clear questions, ground people, as well as, have all the information section off in a way that made sense for each ballot. So it did work well, and it just took time. And the last piece of, one of the last ones from voters was, I really appreciated the ballot structure. I love that I had the option to assess the plan options in the way that is most comfortable given our individual knowledge bases. I don't think I could have been as useful on the neighborhood specific one, maybe the sector one, but the holistic option made me feel like I could contribute in a meaningful way. Thank you. And again, this just goes back to, how we do things here. We try to make things as simple as possible. And, unfortunately, some of them had 67, or not unfortunately, but some of them had 67 questions. And the lowest option was 4. So I'm really thankful for this person for that feedback, because we will be hopefully doing this again, sectioning off the businesses. The last piece of feedback we got was actually from a peer about how we make decisions. So if you remember from your ballot, we actually had 5 options for ratifying the ballot. So you could say yes emphatically, you could say yes, but I have some reservations. You could have just said no, which is cool. You could have said I abstain and I choose to add my vote to the majority, or you could just say I flat out abstain and I don't want to add my message to the majority, to anything. So we did that really intentionally. I think that's called consensus-based decision-making, something new that I learned from this sector. So super happy about that. But, it was really nice, I think, for me in that moment to hear that feedback from our peer, because it just proves to us that, we're on the right track with something. So we were super excited with that. And I'm gonna pass it off to Nia.
Thank you, Sierra. Now I'm just going to go into some feedback that was more critical. And what we've tried to do is we've tried to take that feedback and categorize it under some themes. So we think we were able to pull out 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 themes. And then Sierra, if you could be helpful if as I go along and read and kind of drop them in the chat so people can read along with us, that'd be great too. So this was the most prevalent. Which is not a surprise, and which we actually appreciate. So we decided to call this grouping of feedback, where are the BIPOC and/or small businesses? So Sierra and I had a good time imagining we were writing titles for letters to the editors to try to group these. So these were the titles that we came up with. So first thing I want to say is, I definitely appreciate the thoughtfulness of the feedback that people provided. So I think one of the things, and this kind of goes into some of the philosophical bit that Sierra talked about earlier, that we talk about amongst ourselves, is we believe we are on the right track, so to speak, if we can see that members are making informed decisions, and if they are not necessarily kind of voting by rote or just kind of passively voting or passively participating. We've worked hard to create a community within Ujima, so we understand that there's a high level of trust And we don't want members to just to leave things up to us. So we appreciate that we actually saw evidence, not just with the voting in and of itself, but with the engagement with the ballot and with providing feedback that shows that there were attempts for everyone to properly inform themselves and to really kind of deeply engage. So, as I said, where are the BIPOC and or small businesses? So one person said, I wish there was more small businesses. Another person said, I limited, that doesn't match. Okay, another person said, I have major, I'm gonna remove the second one, Sierra, because that one doesn't match. Yes, I'm gonna go to the next one. Yep. Another person said, I have major concerns about the issues that I raised in regard to several businesses in this plan. I want to be supportive of Ujima's efforts, and as such, am voting yes with reservations. My sincere hope is that you will drop quite a number of the businesses listed in the plan and focus your efforts on economically supporting, promoting, and strengthening BIPOC businesses and communities. That is what interests me in Ujima. As far as I'm concerned, capitalism and white supremacy take care of all the rest. Please keep your eye and resources focused on BIPOC individuals, families, and communities. Another person said, there were too many JP businesses and not enough business investment in Dorchester or East Boston. Why is that? Another person said, light on Roxbury businesses. And then finally, the last person kind of in this category said, I haven't been super engaged, but I felt really surprised by the list and how few of the businesses were BIPOC businesses. I have read some of the emails, but not all. And it might be that there were communications that I didn't engage that would have prepared me for this. And so again, we labeled this, where are the BIPOC and our small businesses? So there are a few responses to these questions or pieces of feedback. So first I should say, Sierra responded to each person that provided feedback on the ballot individually. And so what we're doing here is we thought, well, those are people who took the extra step of providing feedback. We can imagine some people might have had these questions of their own, or might have been kind of thinking some of these comments on their own and just did not take the extra step of providing the feedback. Because as you could see from the first set, just in terms of the length and the process, it's definitely an endeavor. And so definitely by the time you get to the end, you could be inclined to say, nope, I got nothing. I'm done, thanks. So we wanted people to have an opportunity to hear the questions and the comments and then to hear our responses. And so this was a multifaceted response. So first was basically just, this is a look back, so really appreciate this kind of reflection theme, which is this list was compiled during our 2018 citywide assembly that we held in person. And so there are a couple of things that we know about, and I would even, the citywide assembly, there are a couple of things that we know about the way we conducted that assembly at the time that resulted in this list having fewer BIPOC businesses than there should be. So one is, we didn't really have tight controls in person over who was naming businesses at the time. We work, I would say, in person and virtually to really provide experiences that are as interactive as possible. And so usually that means there's a lot happening. So if anyone's been at our assemblies in person, and I think there probably have been a couple of people in the room who were there. You know, we were at Thelma Burns, it's a big room, it's full of people, everyone's running around a room, putting post-its on the wall. So it's active, it's lively, it's a lovely vibe. And we also at the organizational level could have definitely taken more, Claudia said it's electric, could have taken more steps to really kind of make sure voting members and community members in the areas that we want to focus on are the ones naming businesses. The second thing is we weren't tight in our messaging. So when we're talking about Ujima in different places, we know that our interest is investing in BIPOC businesses that have positive social impact. And it's almost become such a given that we're not always as explicit about that as we should be. So we also know definitely during that assembly, we were not explicit with the messaging that the businesses that we are investing in are BIPOC businesses. The frame that we use, and that we continue to use, But the frame that we used were, what are the businesses you love? And so you can imagine that's very wide open. We said, what are the businesses you think we need in our community? What are the businesses you would like to replace? So we have made a couple of refinements for this process, and this was something we knew coming into this vote. The last piece I'll say is this, just on kind of how the list was generated. This was something we knew coming into this vote. However, the list was already generated. We are committed to community voice. And so what we felt we could not do was ourselves as a staff team just kind of unilaterally remove businesses from the list, even though we know some of these businesses will not make it through our entire process because they are not BIPOC owned businesses, but I'll get to that. So this is why some people, when they saw this list, they're going, wait a minute, why do I see quite a few businesses on here that are not BIPOC businesses? As I said, we knew that coming in, so we made a couple of refinements, and you may have noticed if you're a voting member, which is we restricted the ballot to voting members. So you could not even access the ballot unless you signed into your account through our CRM. I see John shaking his head. Unless you signed into our account through our CRM, to really make sure it is voting members who are voting. And part of the reason is because once you complete the ballot, and we'll talk about this a little later, you have an opportunity to name businesses of your own. And again, we wanted to make sure that we had tight controls over who was doing that. The second piece is we were much more explicit in our messaging. So on the ballot and on the personalized investment plans, for example, we are clear to say, name BIPOC businesses that you love, name BIPOC businesses that you think we need in our communities that we don't currently have in our community. So those are a couple of refinements that we made coming into this process that I think served us well. And we're looking forward actually to what will come out of the personalized investment plans, again, with this better messaging. I think the second thing to know about this is, as I said earlier, we did not feel like we could pull businesses unilaterally off of the list. We believe that our process will lead us to BIPOC businesses that community members value and will allow us to invest in those businesses. And so what that means is, for example, had this list been ratified, and to be clear, it was not, because we didn't reach quorum. Had this list been ratified, then what Ujima would do is then start working the list, essentially. So what we would then do is work to get in contact with the businesses on the list, let them know that they've been named by community members as businesses we love, and then ask if they're interested in joining, and let them know that means they're eligible to apply to join our business alliance, and joining our business alliance makes them eligible for investment and other supports. At the time that a business decides they're interested and they'd like to join the alliance, their first step is to go through our community standard screening process. And one of our standards is that the business must be majority POC owned. If it's a nonprofit organization, the board must be majority POC. And so there's where we understand some of the businesses, even though they're on the list and they got through, at that point, they would not make it past the community standards screen. And so there would not be an instance in which investment is going to businesses that are not BIPOC owned. There are additional points during the process at which Ujima members can continue to influence which businesses we invest in. If a business passes our community standards screen and they're invited to join the alliance, and they accept that invitation, and then they seek investment from us, after we go through due diligence, we create a due diligence report for Ujima voting members to review. So this is an additional opportunity for Ujima members to weigh in. At that point, Ujima members can learn more information very specifically about that business under consideration. They can ask that business questions, and it's another opportunity to provide us with feedback that Ujima members think is important. So it's another opportunity to do that kind of red flagging, yellow flagging, to say, hey, Ujima, I'm not sure if you know about this or not, but we think you want to know. It's also another opportunity to green flag. business. So it's another opportunity to say, yeah, I'm glad we're talking about this business, really want to just kind of give them some extra love. That's kind of a second point after the list has been ratified to weigh in on what happens with the business. And then the final point is the actual vote. So after that, whatever recommendation our investment committee makes, and the investment committee is not the one, again, who decides what we invest in. The investment committee simply makes a recommendation, and they will make a recommendation to invest or to not invest. That recommendation goes to Ujima voting members for a final vote. And so there are a few processes along the way where we're ensuring that investments from the Ujima Fund are invested in BIPOC businesses with positive social impact that have been named by community members and that are valued by community members. Is there anything you think I should add there, Sierra? We can't hear you for some reason, Sierra.
I was sorry. Thank you, Nia. Thank you for all that. I put everything in the chat, so if y'all were having trouble or just needed clarification, you can scroll back up in the chat. I'm actually going to drop the community standards, all 36, into the image, into the chat for anybody to peruse. It's not, the community standards list, talks about, 50%, 33% women workforce, 60% POC workforce, as well as POC ownership. And, we also support gender nonconforming communities, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I just want to drop that in just in case anybody forgot.
Cool. Thank you, Sierra. Okay, then the next category that we saw in each of these, there was just one piece of feedback or question in these categories. So the next one we titled, "Is this fair to small businesses?" We're also looking for feedback on these titles as well. And so what this person said was, "Feel a little funny, red or yellow flagging small business. Maybe it's me not paying attention, but I would like to have clear criteria of what triggers a yellow, red flag." So I actually super appreciate this piece of feedback. Again, for me, it's just evidence that people were just really taking this voting seriously and just really thinking about the process and its impact. And so what we said to this person is, we totally understand how that can feel funny. And so the idea of kind of red flagging or yellow flagging a business is not to be punitive. It's really to, again, honor community voice. And so one of the underlying principles or theses of Ujima is, by utilizing a community process, we're getting access to information that we would not get in more traditional processes. And so it's really an opportunity to open that up and to allow community members to provide us with that information. In terms of what the criteria for red flag and yellow flag is, it's very broad, very intentionally, and the intent is for that to be subjective. But the broad parameters are: red is serious. And so we do try to communicate that people shouldn't be red flagging businesses lightly. That it should be, something that we can agree is a very serious concern that would give us great pause. And the process is, a business that receives 3 red flags is removed from the list, not permanently, but it's removed from the list until we're able to research the issue that was raised, and then to have some type of follow-up or some type of recourse. And the issue could be anything, so it's hard to say what our response would be. It would really depend on what the issue is. Yellow flags are mild, and a business can have any number of yellow flags. It doesn't take them out of the running. But again, it's an opportunity for us to receive information that we might not get otherwise. And so what's research worthy, we would research, and the idea is just for us to take it into consideration just when we're thinking about our engagement with the business and our investment in the business. So hopefully that does not feel, again, too punitive to the business. We also respect privacy, so it's never our aim to embarrass business. And so again, we see our role with these businesses to be partners, and to not to be paternalistic, and again, not to be punitive, but really this is just to get as much information as possible. And then I would say we're definitely kind of open to a different frame. If red flag and yellow flag, just from a framing point of view, it's just still uncomfortable given what the intent of that process is. I'm going to go to the next one, unless you think there's anything I need to add, Sierra.
Nope, I think you got it.
All right, great. The next one we called vetting businesses. So this person said a number of those businesses have their own money and or need some serious vetting. And here, I think our response is pretty similar to the response for where are the BIPOC in our small businesses. And actually, I'm looking at some nuance with some of the other ones here, so, and I am going to go back a little bit, which is absolutely. And so the community standards process, we think, is where that vetting happens. Again, the due diligence process is where that vetting happens. And then even before the community standards process, again, we've just made a couple of refinements in our process, again, that we think will have us seeing fewer non-BIPOC owned businesses on the list, fewer chains. So I think this is also a reaction, for example, to seeing some chains on the list and seeing some really large businesses on the list, like hospitals and things like that. And so again, our just being more explicit in the messaging, I think will have us seeing future lists that are kind of less jarring, for lack of a better word, for people. Anything to add there, Sierra? Great. And then I am going to go back, sorry, to just the where are the BIPOC and our small businesses category, because I do just want to lift out the person who said light on Roxbury businesses, and say about that, we put this background information on the neighborhood ballot, but we didn't put it on the others, which we should have, because there were on the neighborhood ballot, there are a couple of businesses on there that are in the Roxbury neighborhood. And so seeing that there were two, we anticipated that people who were using the neighborhood ballot would say, wait a minute, why are there only two Roxbury businesses here? And the reason is the citywide ballot and our citywide assembly was specifically for businesses outside of Dorchester, Mattapan, and Roxbury. And this is because we had already done previous assemblies that were dedicated to those three neighborhoods. So we, in April 2018, had a Roxbury assembly, and then ratified a Roxbury investment plan the following year in 2019. And then we also had a Roxbury, Dorchester, and Mattapan assembly also in 2018, in June 2018. And so the following year in 2019, a Dorchester investment plan was ratified and a Mattapan investment plan was ratified. So we actually already had investment plans for those two neighborhoods, and the citywide assembly was to give Ujima voting members and community members who lived outside of those neighborhoods an opportunity to name businesses in the neighborhoods where they live. And so that's why the ballot was light on Roxbury businesses. I just want to look at this again because I just remember thinking, yeah, I have to kind of lift that one up. And I think that's it for me. So I'm going to kick it back to Sierra because there are a couple more categories, and Sierra is going to talk about those.
Thank you, Nia. So this next category we called a brief reminder. Someone said, could a brief summary of the investment strategy and the criteria for selecting businesses on the list be included along with the ballot instructions? Unfortunately, some of us do not pay attention until voting day. Thank you to that voter. And we did recognize that. So initially, when we were designing the voting comments as well as the ballots, we decided to provide the background information on the voting commons because we knew that people would be accessing the ballots from the voting commons, where you also had access to videos, instructional videos, and other information. And so we didn't put it anywhere else. But we decided that, or in response to this, we said, providing some more touches of background information could not hurt. So that's definitely something that we're going to be incorporating in the future. And the last piece of information that we got, we're calling personalized investment plan. Someone said missing a business, and then they said they linked in the business that they thought that we were missing. So there is, as y'all, if you voted, then you know that at the end of the ballot we said thank you so much for your ballot and your feedback. Here's a personalized investment plan. Please, name businesses that you love in your neighborhood and throughout the city. This list will be used in our future ballots, and it'll feed into our neighborhood ballots as well as our citywide ballots in 2022 and beyond. I think maybe 2021, but definitely 2022. And so if you want to create a personalized investment plan, you will go to, oops, I didn't make one. Okay, I'm gonna link it in the chat because it is in your Neon portal. And so, you're gonna have to sign in to your membership portal, but also, if you don't do it now or you don't save it now, when you log in, you'll see a button that says personalized investment form, probably in pink, yellow, or bright green. And you can fill it out later. We invite you to, say if you're a voting member, include some personal information and talk about existing businesses as well as like startups and new businesses. So pretty emergent, we try to do things in a fashion that feels emergent, I guess. And you can also name, your neighborhood needs, citywide needs, and a lot more other things. So please check it out. And please fill out your personalized investment plan. We are hoping that each and every voting member, all 352 of y'all, use the personalized investment plan to feed into our next steps. So unless I missed anything, Nia, yes, only voting members can make personalized investment plans, move to Boston, become a voting member, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
We're good.
Did I miss it? Okay, all right, so we're done. And I'm going to invite Paige to the stage to talk about member voting debrief form.
Awesome. Thank you. Can I go ahead and share my screen, or I can put the form in the chat alternatively? It's going to be on the screen.
Yeah, why don't you,
okay.
Yeah, go ahead and share your screen
Page.
And Sierra, do you want to drop the link in the chat?
Okay, I don't know the host give me screen sharing permissions. It's that whole Zoom thing.
Okay, let me work on that just a second. Okay.
But so anyway, I will just say this is a form that we use to gather feedback from you all after every event and kind of major Ujima happening, and we'll use this to allow members to express any thoughts or suggestions with us, in this instance about the investment plan voting process. I don't know, Sierra, if you want to try sharing your screen instead.
Actually, Paige, you should be able to do so now. I think I fixed it.
Awesome. Yeah, I can. Cool. So I'm going to pull up what that looks like. And so as you open that link in the chat, you'll see this spreadsheet and a couple tabs at the bottom. The first is the pluses tab, and in there we'll just put things you liked, things you definitely think we should do again, things you think are working well about the process in that pluses tab. Deltas are things to change, things that we could probably improve upon or just do differently in the future. And loose ends are questions. Here you can just put questions you have on the process or other thoughts you have that you want to share with us in the meantime. I think that's it. Sierra?
Thank you, Paige. Sometimes I feel like a reporter when I'm here. That's why I wore my blazer today. And so now we're going to move on to Q&A. You can feel free to unmute. I know that we already have one question. So you can feel free to drop them in the chat or unmute but I'm going to start with our first question, which is from Stephen. How often can we update the investment plans? Every year. We have not created a maximum, but we have created a minimum, and the minimum is once a year. So I'm going to invite you to submit one. And if there are any updates in the future as far as how many to be submitted, we will definitely let you personally know, as well as all voting members.
If I could just add just a quick refinement to that, Stephen. I mean, my recommendation would be once every membership cycle. And what I mean by that is we do annual memberships. And so definitely one now, you're already a member, and then we are working on kind of a kickout email, for example, when people renew their memberships and when they join for the first time, to encourage people to fill it out then. So there will be a lot of encouragement to do a plan with the start of each person's membership cycle. And really, I think I'm inclined to say probably, for example, not too many times during a membership cycle. I can imagine probably you may become aware of some new information within a membership cycle where you might want to change your plan. I say in that instance, sure, go ahead and do that. But yeah, I think what seems reasonable is one every membership cycle.
Thank you, Nia. Are there any other questions?
I have a quick question. I know that y'all did some member outreach pushing, and I was curious to know if each voting member was outreach to, or if that ended up like either not happening or only some members were outreach to, and then how that may have impacted voting.
Thank you for that excellent question, Kelsey. I have some news for you. So we had a bunch of touchstones. So obviously, we had our citywide assembly, which we pushed out to everybody when we invited everybody to come in, which we were promoting for about 6 weeks, I think 5 or 6 weeks. And we invited all of our voting members to, start us off strong and come join us at the assembly. After that, we opened up the voting period on the first Tuesday of March. I believe it was the 3rd. Please don't quote me on that. It might have been March 7th date. So we had a 10-week voting, March 2nd. Thank you, Nia. We had a 10-week voting period. It was in the wire, as well as, on social media every week. We were plugging it because we were trying to be bugaboos, but not too much. And so that was the entire 10-week period. In addition to that, people got emails, when we felt like plugging it in the newsletters. And in the last month, which was April, so most of the weeks in April, everyone got a text message that didn't vote. So if you hadn't voted at that point, we sent you a text message, and we sent 3 text messages over the last 4 weeks of voting. So there were definitely personal touchstones. And in addition to that, I'm actually forgetting, we did actually invite members and Solidarity members to phone bank with us. So we had a couple phone banking sessions as well, where people reached out either by phone or by email or by text to different voting members. So a lot of communication, and that's how we do.
Yeah, and thank you, Sierra, and thank you, Kelsey, for the question. And what I'll add to that is I think there's definitely room for improvement. So one of the things that we identified from the citywide assembly launch, February 18th, and I can't remember if you were there or not, Kelsey, was the number of Solidarity members that night far outweighed the number of voting members. And so one of the things that we identified was to make sure that our outreach was more targeted for the specific launch to voting members. So the outreach that we had been doing throughout the assembly week was good, and it was pretty universal. It was across our membership. And so one of our lessons was thinking a little more deliberately about each event and what targeted outreach for each event could look like. So that's one learning that we're taking into the next assembly event. And then I think there are a couple of pieces of outreach that we saw were pretty effective and that we've seen have been effective over time. So text has definitely been effective. It was very effective in our EPIC ballot that kind of helped us get over the finishing line after really kind of pushing hard for some time. And I don't know if you remember that one. So we did text this time around. And I do think it proved to be effective. Again, the other thing that was effective was our voting extravaganza that we held May 5th. So we got some pretty good feedback on that. People appreciated the opportunity to have some hand holding and to be walked through. And so I think one of our learnings from that is, and we did that May 5th, that's 2 days before the end of the voting period. One of our learnings from that is to do that earlier and more frequently. I think the next bit of improvement was we probably had about 4 Solidarity members, I think, who volunteered to do some phone banking. So we could definitely have more next time around to do the phone banking, because I do definitely think we had some members got more touches than others, for sure. So I don't think we could say across the board, every single member got the same amount of personal touches. So the phone banking didn't reach everybody. And I would say, I think that's probably the biggest hole actually, is that the phone banking didn't reach everybody equally. And so we need to work on making sure that that happens next time around.
Thank you everybody for joining us. It is now 7:16 p.m. and we are going to wrap up this conversation. But thank you all for joining us. And I'm actually going to ask someone to stop recording and we're all going to say bye to YouTube.